Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so excited for this panel today. Uh, we have such a gamut of beautiful, poetic, wise humans here. So I'll just intro everyone. So we have Kendra Cunov, who is a teacher and facilitator. And I always love to intro her as like, if I could have one life coach in my back pocket, it would be her, because I truly feel that she can be with whatever is ultimately. And then we've got Dr. Kate Gordon, who is a holistic healer and transformational coach, and one of my dear friends here in Boulder, and just a truly devotional human being, and part of why I also brought her here onto the panel. And then we've got Daje Aloh, who is a story doula, a visionary midwife, and here's my favorite, ecosomatic depth coach. Love to hear more about that. So thank you all so much for being here. I brought the three of you on because I think it's so important to be having a conversation about the ways that we may have accidentally commodified spirituality in the sort of coaching wellness sphere. And I don't think we did that intentionally. I'm not here, like, I don't think any of us are here to be like, and just be shitting on everyone. But I think that there was some interesting sort of unconscious stories and programs that we just started to proliferate. And I think it's a really good time for us to look at that and see, okay, what happened and how do we shift that? And part of why I love having you three specifically is that you each have, like, when I'm looking at you from the outside in, such a beautiful and very committed spiritual practice and connection, each in very different ways, right? It might be through words, it might be through meditation, it might be through embodiment, but there's these ways in which I deem you all as incredibly devoted and tapped in. So just want to put that out there as a start. So let's start here. Let's start at what happened. How did we get to the point where spirituality and devotion became a modality, a method to get something, as opposed to it just being in itself the practice for nothing else but the sake of devotion and the sake of connection?
I mean, my thought is that usually you have to entice the ego to get someone into a spiritual practice. And so initially to package something in terms of what you get is a really effective way to get someone into a practice. And then through the practice, ideally, of course, you start to realize that it doesn't need to be about what you get, and it was never about what you get. But I think that is an entry point, as people are motivated, right, by like, how do I suffer less? And so speaking to that is generally how you get into spirituality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's such a good point, because I feel like also humans, I mean, we are in this place where we have like one foot in like our divine nature and one foot in our human nature, and the ego is obviously on this side over here. So it's like, how do you bridge that gap? It's like you speak to the ego. So I love that. Kendra, you were going to say something.
What I find so interesting about that is the weave or the pieces that come into play with what you said, which is so great. I'm trying to figure out like what thread to pull on first. It reminds me of when I was living in the Buddhist monastery. One of the things we would do when there were new students is that they would give this talk called a way-seeking mind talk. And the idea was that you've always been seeking the way and sort of looking back, telling the story, how did you get here? And what stood out to me when I would listen to these people's stories was like, nobody came because they were so happy that they just like wanted to live in a Buddhist monastery. But in Buddhism, and I would say like a lot historically, more often spiritual traditions would speak to the suffering. And so what you pointed out, Kate, I think is like, these days we're more likely to speak to the what do you get? And that it's a little harder to talk about the suffering maybe inherent in our lives, or that we might want relief from. And so it feels like that has something to do with the thread of the commodification, is that we're more inclined, and I think that's just capitalism, all right? That's sales, is we're more inclined to speak to the what you get rather than the like, hey, it's kind of fucking hurts right now, doesn't it? It hurts. Would you, how can we be with that?
Yeah.
I love that. I love these thoughts here. I think one of my most immediate thoughts was separation. We got here because we're encoded with the spirit of apartheid in our culture and on every level. And so why would we shift that? Like, why would we consciously shift that code when it comes to spirituality? When spirituality, as I was taught, it is the web that connects all things, living and dead. Spirituality is the matter that exists between all that is. And why would we as humans, when it comes to touching into this like miracle of being one with all, automatically shift off the code that we've been offered and spoon-fed for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years? Just turn it off when we get into spiritual practice. And so for me, there's like this sense of like, I feel this compassion for myself, for us, for being like, oh, like spirituality, it's this great tool for X, Y, and Z. And it's like, yeah, like that is like, almost like we're almost like toddlers with this ancient thing, this ancient like organ that continues to beat and pulse and love us all. And so I don't think we did it on purpose. I think we did it because it's in our water. We're drinking, it's in our air, and I feel like the divine says, okay, kind of like what Kate was saying, is like the divine says, okay, this is what you come to work with. Let's, call you in with the tools that you have and open your eyes to show you that you are a part of all things else. You don't have to do anything to get anything. You are a child of the divine. Like, what would it look like for you to live from that place of radical inherent belonging? And I feel like those questions come in when people start to deconstruct separateness. And along with that deconstruction, we're also deconstructing how we've commodified the organ of the universe, which is spirit, which is, this inseparateness.
Mm-hmm. Well, zooming out that big, I think is important, because it shows us also the shadow and the light and the grace, right? Like there's a lot of what came up, especially in our opening panel, was not necessarily to skirt our responsibility, because that's part of why we're all here. We're super devoted to looking at, okay, here are the places that we could do a little better, but to also give ourselves grace, because as Kendra was sharing, I mean, all of you shared this in some capacity, that there's, in a way, the monks were using bro marketing, right? Like they were like, oh, here are your pain points, like sell them sell them what they want, give them what they need, right? And so it's like that same concept of like, okay, we'll pull them in with the shiny object and then keep them for what actually has substance. And so what's coming up for me is, oh, maybe we weren't totally off. It's, we don't have to be incredibly like in your face about let's make you feel like the worst human ever and then sell you something, but also that maybe there's a piece to that formula that isn't like, we don't need to throw it all away, that maybe there's a piece there that actually can help bring people into a place of what we actually want, what everyone wants, which is more connection to the divine on some level. Yeah.
Well, I mean, listening to you both, Nadia, and then also what you were saying, is that yes, there's the resistance to the essence of full belonging. I think there's both that piece that's like, oh, I don't actually know how to do that, right? Everything is so separate. This actually is threatening my sense of the way things are. And even though we might all say, like, I want more connection, I want more belonging, I want to feel like we're all one, to truly feel that threatens my sense of how things are. And then I think, again, not actually in opposition, but there's like a tension point that with what you were just saying, Nadia, which is like, so often what does get glossed over is what's going to be hard, right? Like, oh, here's the shiny thing, but it's like, oh no, you want a spiritual practice, it's probably going to hurt and you're not going to want to do it. And it's going to like literally rip everything that you ever knew away from you. So if I told you that, would you come? If I told you that it was, it was going to mean doing things you didn't want to do, that you weren't going to want to do your spiritual practice, that it wasn't going to feel good, that you weren't always going to feel divine connection to all things, like, would you want to come? And that idea that we might also have to, and I think also when we really tap into that connection with all beings, that there's this sense like sometimes I have to give something up. And that people also really don't want to do that part, right? Like what if it means I have to give something up for that greater web?
It's like, that's the point. Like you are like there's so much to like allow to just like leave and turn over and transform. And that's the excitement of like stepping into a space where you're being seen and witnessed in that process, over the last year or so, because I've had clients come in who were like, okay, you're going to give me like the 5-step, even though on my website, I'm like, I'm not, I'm not giving you the step-by-step on how to get your best life. That's not really my work. I've started telling people that the work that we do together inside of this space, even though it is narrative medicine, it is death work. It's initiation. It is rites of passage. And I am not initiating you necessarily. You are allowing yourself to be initiated by life, which means that on a cellular level, you are being transformed, which means that on a cellular level, there's a kind of what I've been calling a nested death that is happening. It's not like a physical, you're going to die, but there may be moments being upfront in the first call. There may be moments when you feel like, oh, I don't want this like this anymore. And that's going to feel like a death. And you're going to feel like I'm going to have to shed in order to move toward whatever it is that I'm seeking or wanting. And it's like, my approach may not be the most marketable, but I'm like, no, this is death work. Are you ready? Being upfront. Like we're entering into a threshold. It's going to be beautiful and crazy and weird and wild. And you're going to feel all kinds of things, but it's going to be incredibly, like, you're going to love it on the other side.
I'm going to talk a little bit about reward systems and how that stuff creeped in, because I remember, I don't know, I guess I started dabbling in the whole personal development thing, like 13 years ago, something around then. And I remember manifesting, like it just kept coming up. And I always, from the very beginning, was like, why do I have such an allergic response to this word and to this concept? And at the time, of course, because I was like green and newbie and was like willing to have a beginner's mind, I was like, well, I guess that must be my own resistance and my own like cynical mindset and and I got to work on it a bit more. every single year I'd come back to, how do I feel about this word and this concept? And every year I'd be like, oh, I still can't. I just can't with it. So in the last, I would say, year or two, I started getting a little bit obsessed with watching like culty documentaries, and also documentaries on like mega churches, and just all of these different types of organizations that very much have that ingrained reward system like program encoded into the organization. And I started to see like, wow, there's such a parallel here between the ways in which, you know, mega churches, or even just a lot of I would say regular churches, would be like, oh, if you pay us this amount, you are now cleansed of all sin, you are now a better human. And then different versions of the same thing, essentially, of like, the more you devote financially, the more somehow you're going to be seen by God, rewarded by the divine, et cetera, et cetera. And when I look at, very unintentionally, like not malicious at all, but, you know, programs that are like, if you pay me, you'll probably find, you know, you're going to find your king, or if you pay me, you're going to fill in the blank. So I'm curious, I just wanted to bring that piece into the space, because it feels very intertwined with the way that a lot of people are starting to feel less than, like, I'm not as spiritual because my life doesn't look like that person on Instagram. Something is wrong with me, because even though I'm here on my knees praying, meditating, doing the things that I was told to do, or writing the Instagram post, or whatever it was, the prescription from, you know, the person that's higher up, I'm doing it, and my life is not looking like the person who's telling me to do it. So I know that's a lot. There's many layers in that, but I guess we can sit there and just start to pull on the threads a little bit.
I mean, I think that comes back to your initial point of, when you sell it as a way to get something, whether it's a lifestyle or a income level or a whatever, right? Then people are disappointed when they're not being rewarded with the exterior manifestation of the practice. And like both Daje and Kendra were speaking to, I think that is the shadow of the coaching industry's take on spirituality as a whole, which is that a lot of people who are teaching on spirituality aren't from a lineage, or aren't connected to kind of ways of teaching that were very much upfront around the struggles and the deconstruction and the death processes that are inherent in any spiritual path. And so then people think something's wrong when their life is being broken down, which is often what happens when you embark on a spiritual path, is things are removed, and it can be really messy and painful for large chunks of that. And that's not good marketing, so we don't talk about it as much. And that is a fault in the coaching industry. It's just true. But spiritual teachers, you know, it's different, because like my teachers would never, I mean, that's the difference, right? Like my spiritual mentors were never presenting a shiny picture of what the path was, but the coaching industry does, because we're trying to sell programs, or we're, you know, trying to entice people in. And I do think that's definitely a way in which people are misled with the whole manifestation concept, which is also like, so much of how manifestations presented is like manifesting from ego, right? Like manifestation at its core is a way to actually be empowered. Like, hey, I have some agency over my reality. And that's a beautiful concept to teach people. But of course it's been co-opted into this other thing, which is disappointing for most.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the it's not the inverse of this, but that like another place that it kind of worms its way in. So there's that whole piece that you were just speaking to, which is because we're trying to sell something, we're more likely to talk about the shiny side. And it totally struck me when you said that, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I mean, no place that I ever went for spiritual in terms of my teachers, they weren't really trying to draw people in. It's almost, again, if you think in the Buddhist lineage, it's like people would go to the temple gates and they would sit there and the teachers would like throw rotten fruit at them and tell them to go away and that they shouldn't stay, and and try to drive them away. And then if you could stay, rather than like, no, you definitely want to come, like it's going to be so great. But then this piece that I also hear, which just makes me twitch every time, which is this idea, like the deeper your spiritual practice, the more magnetic you'll be. And I think what's so tricky about everything that we've talked about here is that there's always a thread of truth. So it is true, right? The teachers that I have found, the reason that I have followed them or that I've chosen them or that, that they've been, is because like I've seen, oh, they have more light than I do, or they're deeper than I am, or I can, like, they actually are magnetic. But then it kind of gets wrapped into this, like you're in it, some training program. And the idea is like, the deeper your devotion is, the more magnetic. And then part of the cognitive dissonance is we can also see people out there where like, no, they're making a lot of money and they're not that, they just have shiny object and it's not fair. Like, it's not fair. And I think even as coaches, we get then kind of caught in that, like, wait, I want both what the shiny people have and I want what the deep people have. And like, but wait, I can see that they just understand Instagram better than me. And so like, that's not fair. It's not, and to recognize like both the truth that those spiritual teachers that we found, it's like, yes, they became magnetic, but also you can also, game the system such as it is. And that is also true. In this day and age, there are people who do not have that, but, like, I don't know, we're drawn to them in some other way.
That's a big one. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, that's my kryptonite is like people that I think people shouldn't follow. If I want to make myself feel bad at night, there's like certain people, I'll go look at what they're posting on Instagram and be like, why do people follow?
Yeah, that happens to me too, which we could talk about spiritual materialism and like what that is.
I have some thoughts on this, but I think one of the ones that feels the most important to share is just continuing to go back to like what part of this is coming from the spirit of apartheid, and what part of this conversation about manifesting is coming from inherent belonging. Because if we were really talking about what manifesting is, what we'd be talking about is the creative process that birthed all of this reality. If we were to really break it down and like let ourselves go to like that kernel of what it means to manifest, it means being an imprint of the divine, which is, understanding, hey, I am deeply connected to all that is. I'm connected to this land. I'm connected to the air. Oxygen is moving through my lungs. I am a living system. There's no way at any point that I am not creating something. And like, back when I way 10 years ago, I learned, as I grew up evangelical Christian, and when I was like 23, I started deconstructing all of that, and I like went through this whole like death process. But like before that, I learned that Yahweh, which was a name I sung a lot, like I was deeply devout, and none of that, like all of that had to do with like just the connection that I felt with the divine that never went away, even as I was deconstructing like a paradigm. But that name, I had learned all my life, that name cannot be uttered, the name of God can't be uttered. And there was something about that, but I learned the reason why is because that name, Yahweh, is a transliteration of the sound we make when we're breathing. So it's literally like, like a word that is the sound that we make when we're breathing, the name of God. So even at that level, the breath is the utterance of the divine and the creative potential that we're all inherently a part of. And I feel like the shadow side, I want to have both conversations of like, you know, what is a culture that isn't obsessed with manifesting all the time as we know it? And then what is a culture that sees its inherent like potential and capacity to manifest from the point and the perspective? And I never use that word, so I also have like an allergy to it. But for the sake of this conversation, like, who are we when we know who we are, you know? And what do we create from that place? And so from there, I'm like, I want to have both conversations where it's like, okay, like, can we look at this from, you know, how are we moving from the spirit of apartheid, which is what manifestation culture is? It's like, how can I accumulate as much as possible and elevate myself above, you know, the rest, and inherently creating this separation between who I once was and who I'm going to become through my manifestation process, versus seeing it all as part of this beautiful journey and trajectory of blooming and becoming as a part of a living system, growing in our essence, offering back, receiving and offering back, reciprocity. That's what manifesting really is. It's contributing to our living ecosystems, our essence, our beauty, our power, our ideas, our imagination, designing something, being like the mother, a child of the mother. I am bringing my essence forward in creative potential. And it's no problem. It's not even a thing. It's just who I am, a creative being. So I'm curious about both of those conversations, because I feel like we can get lost in either end of the spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah. When I'm hearing you speak, what really just kept coming up was the difference between, are we creating from a place of love and overflow and alignment and truth and connection to ourselves, versus are we trying to create, but it's more of a taking because there's a fear, a scarcity, a need to hoard, et cetera, et cetera. So that's such a beautiful framework to look at it through. Yeah.
Also, I mean, just to really, it is so counter to the way things are right now to try to drop out of separation. And even, I mean, I find when I talk with people about reciprocity, the separation is so inherent that, again, people have a tendency, like, certainly there is this taker culture, but there's also the other side, which is working with, I mean, I'm sure that you all have that experience, like people who feel so compelled to always be like the over giver, right? And then in some way, what it, like, neither of those are really in reciprocity, right? What is it to not need, like we're not constantly paying a debt, you know, like I got to make sure that I gave at least as much as the other person, or, you know, or to the universe, and so to somehow try to find, I mean, I think that you're right, that in some way, like the ultimate descent is into what is out of separation. I don't know that we can't really do that in 90 minutes, or even maybe this lifetime, you know, who knows, or where we get to go, but trying to find in each moment, like, maybe where am I more on the taker side, or where have I lost the idea of my responsibility to, rather than like, what do I get, and how do we just try to keep finding more and more right relationship with that, you know? And then of course my mind, just because of the way you drew us together, Nadia, is like, yeah, and how do we weave this not only in our own, I mean, I think probably the first step is, right, in my own self, how do I continue to weave that in my own self? And then how do I find some way that I'm spreading it out in whoever the people are that want to come to me, but like, how does that become even the transmission to the people who aren't already wanting to be near me, such that that's the conversation? Yeah.
It's so interesting because we can sit here, right, and have this conversation about our own connection to these concepts, to spirituality, to the divine. And then we also have, we're all business women. And we live in a capitalistic society and we have bills to pay. And there's that reality too. And so I'm going to put this out there. By no means do we need to come up with there's no pressure to like come up with a solution today. In fact, part of what's been coming up with this whole event is that we are in the phase, this is a space really for us to start to evaluate and just sit with the reality of part of what we created and what we want to shift and what we want to create in the future. And that doesn't necessarily mean we have all the answers today, but the big question that just comes up as we're talking is, okay, so we know this concept of we can't be, just selling the shiny object, and it really needs to be about, let's talk about what's true, which is going to get fucking gnarly for a while, or maybe till the end of time, and that your karma is different than the other person, and you could do exactly the same thing that other person did, but it's not going to be the same life, et cetera, et cetera. But then, of course, we all know as business people that may have an impact on our business, our revenue, our ability to also create safety for our own lives. And so I don't know, it's a tricky path to walk, because every time I think about the convergence of spirituality with business or capitalism, I go, I don't know that there is a way to find a middle ground that is going to work and satisfy both pieces. But I'm curious to throw that out into the space and what comes up for you around that. Do you feel that we can be in this place of sort of walking the line between the two, where we are sort of giving reverence to both pieces? Or are we trying to put together two things that just like are not meant to be together?
Well, I mean, I just know where I go with that is like a few different places. One is I've been just really aware of doing my best, at least, to not capitalize on my spirituality. So, there's practices that I have right now that I'm not sharing on social media. And that is it actually takes like more effort than I might like to admit. And to let the process be so I think that's one layer, is finding, and a place where maybe it's not that they never the two shall meet, but to give a little space between, like, I'm not going to show you me meditating. I'm not going to show you me drumming. I'm not going to show you me bowing. I'm not going to pimp that part out, and to the best of my ability, find some other way to convey to you who I am that comes from those things that might be interesting to you, hopefully is interesting to you. And then, I think, Kate, you spoke to this really beautifully, which is like just being more honest, telling more a full story, what's great, what's hard. And in that way, it's not exactly the marrying of spirituality and capitalism, but at least it's, and I do think, and this is just so tricky, but there in a lot of our industry, I think we do have to get really honest about what is enough. So, I look at times when I'm like, yeah, that's might have an impact on my bottom line, but you know what? My bottom line is actually fine. Going from here to here is not a threat to me. And it's healthier for the whole. And then we also have to be honest about if going from here to here is a like individually, like you're saying, Nadia, each person is different. But I know for myself personally, that's been a place to go, like, actually, this is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree that my approach has just been like, how can I be as honest about, from my own experience, lived experience, about what it is that I'm teaching or offering, and allowing you know, for me, it really helped me to see like what got me into a meditation practice, for example, initially was meeting women who were like me, who were young at the time. Like no one I knew at that age was in devotional practice like that, and seeing them and being like, oh, I relate to them on all these levels, and they're a daily practitioner. Like that made it feel accessible and relatable, and like people like me do this. And so for me, sharing certain parts of my life and practice are in an effort to inspire and make it relatable, and not like this thing that is separate, that like you can be in your life and go have a mezcal margarita and also be so devotional to spirit. Like it's okay to do both. And your life can look like this and these, like I want it to be inspiring. And, you know, of course I would make more money if I marketed the things that I teach as a way to become a millionaire, or like as a way to like have your, you know, dream relationship. Like I'm not these things though, so it wouldn't even be true to market those things, which makes it a little easier maybe. But yeah, I think like keeping it with what's true. And if you're on a spiritual path, like hopefully integrity is part of what comes from that. And so like if you're really a practitioner yourself, then the way that you sell and market, I would hope, would be also a transmission of your practice, which is like not to tell lies about what it is that you're offering.
It sounds so obvious when you say it.
But that's why I think I have a hard time with the coaching industry that's not that, because when I see marketing that feels ick to me, it makes me think you're not in your practice. Like that's how I perceive that, personally.
Yeah. I love this. I love this conversation about being honest and all, and like being, you know, just like not needing to put it all out there on the table for everybody to consume. And when I think about it from like a business standpoint, and, you know, like this question of, can we have a world where, you know, spiritual practitioners doing business can marry those two and have harmony with them? And I don't really know, like, I don't know the answer to that fully. I think we are, you know, as a world right now, we are in the contraction mode. We are birthing, you know, a whole new paradigm. It's unavoidable. There's no, you know, I think at this point, nobody's like, ooh, new paradigm. I'm so tired of hearing that word. It's like, no, we either going to birth a new paradigm or we're not going to survive this one. So it's like, get on board, let's go, or, you know, goodbye. It's like that level of like, okay, we've got to go. And so part of like one of the things that I feel like I draw inspiration from when I start to imagine, you know, I enjoy being a business owner, I enjoy being an entrepreneur. I love ideas. I've been in marketing since I was 19. As a poet, I've had to find my way, a poet. And like, you know, like at night I was like tending prayer rooms and things like that. So I had to find that sort of like middle place for myself. And for me, that happened through, you know, the power and magic of storytelling and the orational arts is what I see marketing as, like an art of oration or a design practice, which in and of itself can be like highly spiritual and ritualistic, and like can deeply connect you with the earth. I feel like the earth is a designer. I have all kinds of thoughts about it, but that's something to find. That's something to sort of like be on a path about and be curious about. And I personally draw a lot of inspiration from this idea that, one, business and marketing, 90% of it is philosophy. And so a lot of people are trying to like make it into this like spiritual practice, and it is, but it's also, what are your core beliefs? What is your construct about what business or marketing or your place in the world even is? Because that's going to inform every way you go about it. We can, and I think the question that leads me there is like, I can either choose to see all the things that are going on in the world and like constantly be pointing them out, or I could just be like, okay, noted. And who am I going to be? What are my constructs? How am I going to orient? What are my mythologies that inform how I move and practice and be? and take that into every realm and area of my life. So one of the philosophies of business that I draw a lot of inspiration from is regenerative business, specifically as like imagined by Carol Sanford, who is this wonderful elder who travels the world and shows up into the offices of CEOs of companies like, Seventh Generation and P&G, and whips founders into shape. And I love her for that. She's just like this older woman who is like getting the world together in the most profound way, and nobody's really paying attention to her with the level of attention that she deserves. But she's doing a lot of amazing, deep design work on the world stage in the realm of capitalism. And she's like seen by many of these founders as like a crazy hag first, then also this like beautiful grandmother figure, an elder who brings in her like grandfather's Mohawk indigenous wisdom into everything that she does. So regenerative business is a construct that might be supportive and like, weaving together what is my spiritual practice as a practitioner, as someone who is in service to my community, look like in a new framework of business. And so it's just an offering. I feel like it's just a construct, an opportunity, a philosophy to work with and weave with, to not necessarily like over identify with, but to start to like answer those questions for ourselves and aligning ourselves to the earth and the seasons and what it means to be, a business owner at this time in the world. It's weird. I don't know. I don't have any answers, but I know that like there are lots of people out there designing, innovating, imagining. We don't just have to succumb to, manifestation culture as the answer for spirituality, or, being an overgiver, which can be the place that most spiritual practitioners tend to go to when they're not swinging toward this direction. And I've been like on both, and like I've been here for just a little bit, and I was like, that doesn't feel right. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to like undercharge, and then that doesn't feel right. So like, how do we construct, I think, is the question. And that was a weavy, windy answer to that question that wasn't really an answer, but I only hope to like offer some ideas on how to move forward rather than create answers. And one of those ideas is like, maybe it's a philosophy issue. Maybe it's not so much maybe it's not so much about like, what the divine would want, but it's about what are we using our capacity to construct and world the world into place. The divine has given us this gift of constructing and myth making and writing and designing. What are we doing with that? How are we philosophizing around it? How are we creating belief systems around that? And can we work with that on that level?
Yeah. I don't know why, but grace keeps coming up in this conversation today. This idea that we can moment to moment with each decision be in baby steps as we start to create this new vision, this new ethos, this new culture, go, okay, is this an alignment? Okay, this new page that I'm putting up, this post that I'm about to press send on, this, just in the little tiny things, how can we just start to realign one brick at a time, essentially, and at the same time give ourselves grace that we are really on this tightrope of, we're still operating in an old world. We're trying to birth a new world. We all came into this because we are here to serve in some capacity in our own unique ways, but we're here to transform. We are change makers, and here to help facilitate that in other people through their connection to their own truth and how they can also create and become change makers. And so we know that on the deepest level that we are here for that. And yet it goes back to that pendulum swinging of like, it's not great to self-flagellate so much that now we're in freeze and like, oh, because I saw that too the last few years, like a lot of people being like, I'm out. of the coaching industry. And I'm like, wait, where are you going? Like, if you got to believe in the industry, even if right now we're going through this weird maturation phase that is awkward. And we're looking back and going, oh no, did I really wear that outfit? I did. Okay. It's like you go back and look at your high school pictures, you're like, oh. And it's like, that's how a lot of us feel about previous sales pages or emails that we might have sent out, or ways in which we even got on conversations, sales conversations on the phone. I mean, I was just talking to my friend yesterday about this, like 10 years ago when I first started learning how to sell. Yeah, I did the script thing that I got taught because I was like, that's how, right? Isn't this what we do? I mean, it was taught in my coaching certification school. It was taught by all the coaches the first few years that I was going. So it's like, we've all done those things to some capacity. So can we just moment by moment, brick by brick, go, okay, we're going to start to shift the culture, and it's okay. Like, we'll take responsibility, but it's okay, because if we self-flagellate or just check the fuck out or freeze, that's not going to help anyone either. But instead, we're going to slowly chip away at it, is sort of the best we can do, essentially.
There's something about that to me actually feels like the true death process that you were talking about earlier, that it's, in some ways, it's easier to just try to delete all previous versions of ourselves, or to like leave the industry, or to try to jump to a solution, right? And I mean, I think about this in many areas of my life, that we're just at a time where we know the negative impacts of every single action we take, and there are no actions that have no negative impacts. Like, there's just, you're going to walk here, you're going to drive here, you're going to buy this, you're going to not buy this, you're going to cook, like every single thing, you're like, oh, I'm aware of all the negative impacts of every action I take. And there's either trying to be totally pure, right, in one sense, or defending against them, or just the willingness to go like, this is the best step I know how to take right now. And I think, I mean, this is where, when you say the word alignment, I think that's a helpful compass point. And even just to be able to go, I don't even know if I can do anything that's in 100% alignment, but I'm going to make the best step I know how to make. And I'm going to be willing to feel both the rightness, but also maybe the hurt of it. The heartbreak of that there might be even a negative consequence that I know of in the moment, or an unintended one. And I don't need to just always defend against, like, that's part of the death process, that it, like, oh yeah, I have made mistakes. I will make mistakes. I'm doing my best. And I think that pendulation also just speaks to like the urgency, which again is so tied into that same, it's just in the same paradigm. And so the willingness to let it be like it's like a snake shedding its skin or something, and again, kind of like an actual death process, rather than, can I make it fast and easy? Could I just be done with it and like be in wherever I'm supposed to be next? And it's like, oh, it kind of hurt, it doesn't feel good. And yeah.
That's so important, because it's very hopeful. I'm seeing a lot more coaches, facilitators, and teachers starting to show the process, the messy process, that like, it isn't just the before and after framework that we were also taught for our about page back in the day. Before everything sucked, and now everything's great after I put this thing together. It's like, that's like not life. That in itself is a framework of a story that literally does not exist. There's always and it goes back to even just like the Disney movies and stuff. It's like, and then they lived happily ever after. It's like, well, okay, that doesn't work either. It's never that way. It's never just happily ever after. And so there's something about dismantling the before after framework that I still see myself get caught up in. I'm like, okay, once I get through this chapter, by next week, by this full moon, everything's going to be better. It's just like, and then magically I'm going to be happily ever after. And it's like, Why do I still think that's going to happen? Oh, right. It's so deeply ingrained from the movies I watched as a kid through, the ways in which we were just taught in school that that's what was going to happen. If we worked hard, we would get into the school, then we would make money, and then we would find the person, and then all would be well. And so I love this whole piece of sustainable change, that it does have to go in baby steps, and that that's the way that will actually shift things. And instead of just being like, rip the Band-Aid off. And so even in creating this event, right, I was like, okay, by the end, we're going to have a set of prescriptions and we're going to, and it's going to be great. And it's like, I'm having the conversations and I'm like, oh, right. That's my medicine, right? Through this is like, oh no, we don't have all the answers, and we're not just going to like fix it up and button it up. And by the end, we're all going to have like a new manifesto. This is what we are all doing. We all co-signed it. And it's just like, it's more just bringing up the questions and being in the inquiry, which we all know is the personal growth process in itself, right? Is being like, what's that about? And probably continuing to ask that question till our deathbed. Yeah.
And I think what you just said is such a big way in which we can all be accountable in the way that we are marketing what we do, which is to not promise an arrival point in which all things are shiny and bright and you never suffer anymore. Like, to not get sucked into in any way, like pretending that that's how it is, right? To not reinforce that narrative for people. And I think that is where, like, for me, that's the criticism of what I see that I think is problematic in the way that coaching co-op spirituality is, that it promises this before and after story that's very linear, and that people are disillusioned and disappointed and feel taken advantage. I mean, like, all of that comes from this false promise of like, when you do this, then you will be whatever the outcome is, that we can't guarantee. It's really, no outcome can be guaranteed for the most part. It's like guaranteeing outcome in the first place, I think, is part of what it would be helpful to move away from.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's what I love about, I mentioned this earlier, but like the regenerative concept of business as a philosophy, because, it's not about those immediate results that you're going to get, and promising that. Because like the details of somebody's change process is so nuanced and complex. What if it looked like embracing the complexities rather than trying to simplify some things so that someone can feel more safe? What if we complexified our conversation about what safety even is inside of a container? It's a conversation I really want to be having, because it's like, your nervous system is so complex and so nuanced and so intimately blueprinted. I can't guarantee what safety is going to feel like exactly for you inside of this space with me. I could say one thing about cereal and it could trigger you. I don't know, and like, can we have that level of conversation about what it means to cultivate regeneration in our culture, which looks like the life-death life cycle, and embracing our complexity and looking at things from a systemic lens, seeing ourselves as a part of a living system, a part of not a cosmology, but a part of the cosmos that contains many cosmologies. Like, it's so complex, and it's supposed to be that way. And can we embrace that instead of hyper simplifying, trying to make it, 100% foolproof, safe for everyone, which is a lie, I don't know.
You guys are bringing in so much good stuff. I can't. Okay.
I remember having a conversation with someone, because we love the butterfly metaphor in the coaching industry. And I was like, there's got to be a lot of butterflies that just never turn into a butterfly. And even, and so again, it's like the nuance that's being talked about, right? The complexity of that there's always this thread of truth. Like, yes, this is this valuable metaphor. And the truth is, like, sometimes a part of you, not the whole person, isn't going to turn into goo and die until some point. But, a part of you, that transformation actually literally might be cocoon, goo, like, oh, that part's done. there might not be a butterfly, you know, or I think about when you're talking about regenerative ecosystems, right? You know, sometimes, yes, it's life, death, life in the sense that we take out this small tree so that it keeps this meadow, but it's not like, oh, this tree gets to live again. This tree actually, it dies for the sake of the meadow. And again, I mean, that kind of links back to some things we talked about earlier, which is, what if it requires sacrifice? Which actually, I don't know if we've used that word, but like that is in some way so much part of the spiritual journey, is like, what is sacrificed? And I think that's a hard one, you know. Even sometimes in the sense like, well, we think, okay, there'll be a sacrifice, but can I control what gets sacrificed? Like, I'll sacrifice this. This would be okay.
Not that one.
Yeah. I just, last little thing, but I listened to this really interesting interview or conversation with Marianne Woodman recently. And I don't actually know if she's passed at this point. The conversation was maybe back in like 2012 and it didn't get published until, but they asked her about her process for when she needs to sacrifice something. And she had this whole process that had to do with like going away and being in solitude, and then all this writing that she did, and then actually coming up with an object that would be sacrificed that went on the altar. And like, and she would walk by it every day. And if she couldn't let it go, she was like, well, I guess I'm not going to sacrifice that. Like, that doesn't get to happen. I mean, it was a whole process. I was like, wow, yes.
Mm. Ooh, that's so good.
Yeah.
I need that ritual.
I'll send you the conversation.
Maybe. Wow, there's so many pieces coming in here. I'm just writing a lot of notes, partly just for myself. I mean, with all these conversations, I've been like, oh, okay, here's what I'm learning from this. But you know, just now the idea of sacrifice and how much we just ignore, like, okay, we're just going to get more things, but there's nothing that we need to let go of in order to get more things. And that's like where I keep feeling this like hoarding energy that we're getting more and more into, like more all the time. But then I'm also not going to do what is the natural process in nature, which is like something has to go as a result. Like you can't just keep accumulating. Complexity, grace, no guarantees. I'm just sort of cliff noting where we got to with all, I mean, there's so much more than that. And it just really feels like the most important thing is to come back to, oh, we are here to give people, to offer tools to empower people back to their own connection to truth, alignment, divine, nature, whatever they want to be connected to. But that we are not here going, this is what you're going to get when you buy my program. You're going to be just like me. This is the lifestyle. You're going to be at the beach and working from your laptop, right? That was a thing for a while in our industry. That suddenly there's this before after, you're going to go in, everything sucks, and after you work with me, everything's going to be great. You also are of course going to manifest your partner along with $1 million. What else do we do? Oh yeah, like, you know, perfect body, you're never ever going to have any chronic pain again, and so on and so forth. So it's been really interesting to zoom out and see where we're at with things. There's also this piece, I don't know, I just keep coming back to high school, right? So I talked about the embarrassing cost, you know, outfits, but I also think that there's this ethos that again was unintentionally created, where it nearly felt like high school all over again on Instagram. And that there's a, you know, the popularity contest of the vanity metrics of how polished your reels and photos are. And, you know, one thing that I also have that weighs on me quite heavily, and it's a little bit of it's tangential to this commodifying spirituality piece, but it feels important to bring up, is that I started to notice, even in my own business at some point, and I had to very consciously pull back, that we were putting the price tag of our own, more photo shoots, more videographers, more whatever the fuck. Okay. And then, okay, now my program has to be more expensive because it takes this much more marketing. And at some point I was like, okay, why is that burden on my client? Why do they have to pay me more now that the actual service hasn't shifted that much? Right. But why now? Because I'm getting bigger and shinier and I have more of team and I have, and I just noticed myself getting bigger and bigger and was like, I don't want any of this shit. Actually, it doesn't feel right to me if I was, absorbing that cost and I could, great. But I was noticing that a lot of the business coaches and the overall rhetoric, even in my masterminds, my peer masterminds, my paid masterminds, was like, oh yeah, well, you just pay more to make it look better, and then the client pays more, and it just grew to the point that I was like, it's not feeling right. So that feels, yeah, I don't know, I just sort of went on a tangent, but that feels like very much also connected to this way that Instagram became, it was part of that thing that blew everything into bigger proportion than I feel is necessary, whether it be around like influencer coaches winning the popularity contest and us trying to catch up, or whether it be like the clients having to really take on a higher price tag as a result. So I don't know if anything comes up for you guys around that piece as well.
I feel like you're having a conversation about design, and not design from like the visual appealing perspective, but design from like thinking about how all the things work together and function. And I feel, like good design listens. Good design is in relationship with who the thing is being designed for. And design that is not good, quote unquote, is functionally not in a relationship with what it's being designed for. It's in relationship with that person's resources, their money, their attention, their adrenaline. And it's just trying to hook, instead of weave. And so I feel like this points back to what we were talking about earlier, which is like, being business owners, which is like part of being a business is we are functionally a part of a design process, a societal design process, where we are together weaving society. So what does it look like for us as business owners to grow in that capacity and that skill set, to be good listeners who weave with society? That's how you get good design. It's not about being shiny or attractive or, like adrenaline, an adrenaline pumping machine, pumping out the dopamine hits with the shiny systems and the X, Y, and Z. No, it's about, is my business in a functional relationship with the people, and that's a complex question, but that's something I would like to offer on the table.
My mind is blown. I feel like I'm gonna have to go back, look at my whole business through this lens. Thank you.
Yeah, I hear you on the inflation. It's like the inflation piece, right? Like the facade that people create, because if your business looks more successful than it is, if you look more beautiful than you are, if everything looks richer than it is, then the money will come, because people, like, it's this false thing that gets created. And we've seen so much of that in the coaching industry, like people who are pretending, right, like they're making X amount of dollars and like living a certain lifestyle because it attracts higher paying clients, but it's all like this very weird house of cards thing. And I think that kind of peaked in the last few years, it seems like, right? And then a lot of those things that weren't actually real started to fall apart. And I guess for me, it always just comes back to like, you just like, it's about showing what's true. So like, don't show what's not true. Like, it would be so weird for me to go do a photo shoot in like Louboutin heels and like create a whole I don't know, like it just wouldn't be true. Like that's not, so it's like, can you market what's true? Yeah. I mean, again, it's so obvious, but I do see how in the industry there was a lot of pressure to capitalize on that way of doing things, right? Like to be like, oh, there's a model, and the model is, right, if you pay a super successful coach a ton of money, then they're going to teach you their ways of kind of creating this successful image, and then people will pay you more, and then you will become successful. But it's like you create the image before you're actually at that place, which is incongruent. And so it's like, don't be incongruent.
Yeah. And people paying for that image as opposed to the service, right? Like a lot of people, again, coming back to the disappointment, why did the coaching industry start to get a lot of shit? It's like a lot of people paid a lot of money and then were like, this is what I got for $20,000. Like,
right. Well, it's like no substance.
Right. It's like, yeah, because you paid the photographer and the videographer and you paid for the Louboutins and the whatever. Like you didn't actually, like the percentage that you're paying for the actual service is way less. And it's understandable, right? Like a lot of people tried that and weren't intentionally, I think. I mean, I'm not saying that there's a spectrum, right? I'm sure there's some people who are very consciously creating an image that is incorrect and incongruent. And I think a lot of, just by virtue of a photo shoot, we all look better in our photo shoots than we would if we took a photo when I first wake up, my bangs are standing up this way. Like it's right. So it's like the nature of that, along with Instagram and the way that it highlights our life, even for those of us who try to show the messy, it's still like, I still have people come to me and be like, sound like you're thriving. And I'm like, I'm having the worst year of my entire life. I don't understand. How am I still not? And I'm consciously trying to show that things are hard, right? And also beautiful. So I think there's a nature to social media on some level that makes it very difficult for people to fully understand, the entire depth and range of our experience from day to day. But yes, there are those who did it intentionally and those who did it unintentionally. And either way, going back to that brick by brick, step by step thing, I think it's like coming back and going, okay, what else can I shift a little bit that doesn't offer guarantees, promises, and a lifestyle that just probably isn't really going to happen. Sorry.
I mean, this is a little bit of a tangent, but just something, there was a question I think that you sent in an email ahead of time, Nadia, that sparked this for me around again, perhaps an unintentional, and it is partly that we are also doing this in a capitalist society where we also need to live our lives, but there's something about recognizing like we do need each other. That we need support, we need community, we need guidance, we need mentorship, we need elders. And it's almost like this industry has sort of become a stand-in for a lot of those. Like for my own self, I mean, I've been grappling with that. I've held this space that's kind of from the outside, I think looks a little bit like a membership, but it's not really a membership. I like to call it a community. I'm like, can I call it a community? Is it possible to create community in this way? And I think that is part of the internal work for each of us, is to go like, it is what I'm offering in alignment with what is possible. That's my deepest desire with what I'm offering. This is the best way I know how to cultivate it. This is, but are these things, and just recognizing like, partly people really need community. They need guidance. They need to not be alone on their journeys. And then it's just really hard these days. And so when this becomes a stand-in, and when this is what I do for a living, and therefore I charge for it, it can get weird, Like, okay, you're not paying me to be your friend. That's not what we're doing. Or, how do, and so I think like the question that I'm left percolating in a lot of ways is that simultaneous, where there's my job, and then there's like how to just support people in having what they need, and what, like, it's ultimately, it is an ecosystem, you know, how our elders supported without necessarily always having to charge for their services, or how, you know, what is this role?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. There's so much we could keep pulling at. And I would love to just offer a closing question as we start to wrap up. And I've been asking this from every panel. And with past panels, I ask both, there's two pieces, but I feel like we've actually addressed one piece so much in our conversation that I'm just going to offer the other. And that is just to invite each of you to bring in a prayer into the space as we close, part of what you envision as we move into the next chapter, as we lay the next brick, as we take the next step. If there is something you would like to offer into the space.
My prayer, this is our prayer for the coaching industry.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My prayer for the coaching industry is that people trust in their own timing and maturation, so that we can really teach from what's true, from where we're at in our current point and place in life, that we don't need to be more than, or farther along than, or bigger than, but really trusting that there's a gift in your embodiment and your wisdom that will help someone, and to just teach from that place and not anymore. And to trust that the transmission of you, that the embodiment of what you live is enough to attract people who will benefit from that offering, and that it gets really sticky anytime we step outside of that.
Thank you.
I was asked recently, like, what did I think the next like great phase of the world was or something? And I was like, oh, so, you know, but it came in when you asked this question, and I think it has been said so much, but it really came in that moment. And I guess what my prayer is, it's the prayer for the world, but it's the prayer for myself, for all of us in this industry, is may we continue to listen more deeply. May we continue to listen. May we continue to listen and be willing to be changed by what we hear. May we be willing to listen and not always have an answer. You know, maybe be willing to say, I don't know. And may we be willing to more than try to, you know, prescribe the destination, but like listen and then describe the path.
Thank you.
My prayer for this industry in particular, of people who, you know, I want to assume have just really big hearts and have a desire to see people get free ultimately. Like I assume that the motive isn't just to get more money or get more clients, but the core motive is liberation. My prayer is that we would begin to see ourselves one from this place of radical inherent belonging, deeply actually rooted and intertwined with the earth, and not this like image of, you know, serene groundedness that we like to sell, but like actually in the earth with the heart of the mother and communing with her in real time, not just, you know, when we hop on the calls with clients, but in real time. And from that we begin to see this gift of coaching, this gift of mentorship or facilitating or whatever, leading, you know, whatever it is, as a capacity to midwife culture. We are culturing together. That is what my prayer for the coaching industry is, that we would innovate into midwifery.
Mm. And so it is. Yes. Ugh. Okay. Thank you all so much for your hearts, your service, your time, your wisdom here, your embodiment, your essence, the whole enchilada. For anyone who is watching and listening, somewhere around this video, above, below, we're not really sure, there's going to be bios, and you can click through and make sure, if you don't already, follow the work and content and writing and wisdom of these beautiful humans. You can do so up, down, below somewhere. Truly, I feel so nourished by this conversation. I feel so much hope. I feel so much reconnection to why I moved in this direction in the industry and why all of us are here. So thank you so much for that gift.
Thank you, Nadia, for having this vision and holding this space and following through with it.